Sony. Sony stepped into the TV world the same way your mom barges in when you're clearly doing something suspicious, with purpose, judgment, and zero hesitation. Back in 1968, when most TVs were mushy blobs of color, Sony dropped the Trinitron, a single-gun aperture grille CRT that instantly embarrassed every competitor. And here's where things get interesting. Trinitron won a 1973 Emmy Award, which means a TV literally beat human actors that year. Through the 80s and 90s, Sony doubled down with KV series Trinitrons, and by the early 2000s, you had the massive Vega CRTs, silver rectangular bricks strong enough to destroy your lumbar spine if someone asked you to help move one. Gamers still hunt these down because the PS2 and retro consoles look unreal on them. Sony shifted to flat panels in 2005 with Bravia, rolling out SXRD projection sets, early LCDs, and eventually some of the best LED TVs ever made. Their crown jewels became the Master Series and OLED models using LG panels paired with Sony's absurdly good processing. Motion handling, best in the business. The funny part nobody talks about. Sony TVs have always been expensive because Sony never tried to win the budget crowd. Their whole vibe since 1968 has been, we make the TV, you figure out how to pay for it. Samsung. Samsung quietly entered the TV market in the late 1970s, but things didn't explode until the early 2000s, when they realized Americans love two things besides deep-fried food and NFL: giant screens and bright colors. Early Samsung LCDs, around 2003 to 2006, popped up in every mall display, blasting saturated hues that made nature documentaries look like cartoons. But most people don't know this detail. Samsung was the first to truly mass-produce LCD panels at scale, which allowed them to bomb the market with affordable flat screens. By 2008, Samsung became the world's #1 TV manufacturer, a title they still hold. So how are they able to hold the #1 spot? Well, in the 2010s, Samsung doubled down on LED brightness. The 8000 series, the F8500 plasma competitor, the KS8000, and later the QLED lineup felt like Samsung saying, fine, if we can't beat OLED at black levels, we'll blind you with brightness instead. Curved TVs, 2014 to 2016, had their moment too. They were marketed like IMAX came to your living room, even though everyone eventually realized they only look good if you sat at the exact center. Today, Samsung pushes Mini LED Neo QLED and refuses to admit OLED is great, while simultaneously selling OLED panels they buy from LG. Tech is wild. LG. LG spent the 1990s and early 2000s making respectable but not legendary LCDs. Then 2013 hit, and LG rolled out the first commercially viable OLED TV, 55EA9800. I know, a lot of numbers. A curved, futuristic display that cost as much as a used car. But people don't really know this about LG. LG was the only major company willing to fully commit to OLED manufacturing. Everyone else hesitated. LG pressed the gas pedal. Pedal to the metal, baby! By 2016, the C6 OLED dropped. Then came the C7 in 2017, C8 in 2018 with the Alpha 9 processor, C9 in 2019 with HDMI 2.1, CX in 2020, C1 2021, and C2 2022 Evo panel. Each one brighter, faster, and loved by gamers. Even more so than the actual gaming consoles. What's a gaming console anyway without a good TV, am I right? LG also invented some of the most absurd TV flexes ever. Wallpaper OLED, a panel so thin it needed a separate box just to survive. Rollable OLED, because apparently someone asked for a TV that disappears when you're bored. The part people get wrong and don't know. LG is not just another brand. Since 2017, LG Display has provided almost every OLED panel used by Sony, Panasonic, Philips, and others. LG turned into the OLED Pablo Escobar of the industry, quietly supplying everyone who wanted the good stuff. Panasonic. Panasonic entered the TV race in the 1970s, built solid CRTs through the 1990s, and then made one of the smartest moves in TV history, mastering plasma. By 2008, when everyone else was fighting over LCD scraps, Panasonic dropped the Vera PZ and S1 series, bright, smooth, cinematic displays that made LCDs look like spreadsheets. The craziest part is this: the 2011 to 2013 Panasonic VT, GT, and ST series are still considered some of the greatest TVs ever built. Plasma not only was bright or colorful, it had motion clarity that LCD still struggles to match in 2026. The ZT60 2013 is basically TV royalty. Videophiles would still trade organs for one. Panasonic shuttered plasma in 2014, mostly because plasma panels were expensive and regulators weren't fans of giant heat-producing rectangles. After plasma died, Panasonic pivoted to OLED, and quietly made some of the world's most accurate picture quality TVs, like the GZ2000 and HZ2000, though they only sell them in Europe and Japan. Panasonic's story feels like the gifted kid who peaked too early. They mastered plasma, retired it, nailed OLED, and then exited the US market entirely. TCL. TCL technically started making TVs in the 1980s in China, but nobody outside the country gave a poop until the mid-2010s. Then 2014 hit, Roku partnered with TCL, and suddenly every dorm room in America had the same $299 television. If you were in college between 2014 and 2018, you either owned a TCL Roku TV or stared at one while your buddy cried over their Xbox not connecting to the Wi-Fi. Here's the part that usually gets skipped. TCL also owns CSOT, one of the world's largest LCD panel factories. That single fact is the cheat code. When you own the factory that makes the panels, you don't pay marked up prices. You pay "we built it ourselves" prices. That's why a 55-inch TCL 4 series could retail for $249, while competitors were still pretending $700 was budget. The TCL 6 series was the turning point. Mini LED backlighting, quantum dots, full array dimming, all for $649 to $999 depending on size. Reviewers literally went from roasting TCL to recommending them over Samsung and Sony in the same year. That almost never happens. By 2021, TCL jumped early into mini LED with sets like the R646 and QM8, offering thousands of dimming zones at prices normally reserved for open box clearance TVs. The QM8 in particular became one of the only TVs under $1,500 that could blind you if you weren't careful. So why are they so affordable? TCL's entire business model is vertical integration and scale. They make their own panels, produce in massive volumes, and skip expensive marketing campaigns. Instead of paying for Super Bowl ads, they rely on the internet yelling, "Dude, this thing is actually insane for the price." TCL's strategy has never changed: overwhelm the market with value. Even when they miss, like the awkward 2020 Android models, they rebound fast. If Samsung is the king of brightness and LG is the king of OLED, TCL is the king of, okay, that's stupid cheap. Hisense. Hisense spent most of the 2000s quietly building affordable TVs nobody wrote home about. The kind of sets you bought for $199 at Walmart and never bothered to learn the model number. But around 2016, something shifted. Hisense started pushing hard into ULED tech, adopting quantum dots early and focusing on raw performance per dollar. A detail that slips past most people. Hisense leveled up by acquiring their way into better technology. They purchased Sharp's US TV business in 2015, which included factories, manufacturing rights, and access to more advanced production lines. Almost immediately after the acquisition, Hisense started rolling out stronger models like the H9G, about $499 to $699, and the U8G, about $749 to $999. The H9G shocked everyone by outperforming TVs that cost twice as much. Contrast, brightness, motion, all coming from a TV that looked like it wandered into the wrong price bracket. Reviewers kept double-checking the price because the performance genuinely didn't make sense. The U8 series turned things up even more, pushing well past 2,000 nits on the U8H and U8K. Hisense treated HDR like a competitive sport and kept boosting brightness each year like they were trying to summon the sun. Meanwhile, the TVs stayed under the $1,200 range for most sizes, which is why Hisense became the go-to brand for people who want premium specs without premium regret. Why are Hisense TVs so affordable? They manufacture aggressively in-house, buy up undervalued factories, skip the luxury branding tax, and chase scale instead of prestige. Their philosophy is simple: sell powerful hardware at volume and let word of mouth do the marketing. Yes, build quality had a reputation for inconsistency, but the performance was undeniable. Today, Hisense pushes Mini LED and QLED harder than almost anyone in the value category. Hisense is that friend who pretends they don't study, then aces the exam and shrugs like, yeah, I guess it went okay. Vizio. Vizio launched in 2002 out of Irvine, California, and immediately positioned itself as the wallet-friendly brand that punched above its weight. Their first big win came in the late 2000s, with cheap 1080p LCDs that were actually decent, followed by the M series 2013 to 2016 and P series 2014 to 2020 that delivered shockingly strong picture quality for the money. And people rarely mention this, but Vizio was one of the earliest companies to push full-array local dimming into affordable TVs. While Samsung and Sony guarded that tech like a family secret, Vizio tossed it into budget sets and said, "Here, have fun." Their P-Series Quantum 2018 was a beast for its price. Gamers flocked to Vizio for low input lag and HDMI 2.1 adoption. The downside? Software. Vizio's SmartCast OS often felt like it was held together with duct tape and empty promises. Still, Vizio filled a real niche: American-designed TVs that looked great and didn't cost rent money. Even today, they remain the go-to choice for someone who wants good contrast, strong brightness, and no desire to take out a loan. Philips. Philips began making TVs in the 1950s, long before most people had electricity stable enough to enjoy them. They produced solid CRTs throughout the 70s and 80s, and by the early 2000s they introduced something the entire industry still envies: Ambilight in 2004. And this is where it secretly gets genius. Ambilight was designed to reduce eye strain by projecting colored light onto the wall behind the TV, matching the on-screen content. But then people realized it also made the screen look bigger. Philips TVs became cult favorites in Europe, though the US versions died off after Philips licensed their branding to Funai. Outside the US, Philips actually makes superb OLEDs using LG panels paired with Ambilight tech. You'd think more companies would copy it, but nope, Philips owns the Vibe lighting throne alone. For a brand that rarely flexes in the US, Philips somehow created one of the most recognizable TV features ever: a literal glow-up.